If in brief about myself, I'll add a few more words. I have more than 10 years in professional software development, 8 of which are the enterprise sector, and since 2013, one way or another, in the cryptocurrency. Today I lead a development team called BlockSoft. We are engaged in a variety of things related to the cryptocurrency and the solutions that are built on them, including the release of new cryptocurrency and the security audit of smart contracts. This is very brief. The topic of today's meetup is quite complicated. I was told that basically it's for online. Therefore, I will talk about complex things as simple as possible, but if it is not clear, this is normal. I'll post the presentation. I prepared it in English, though that it could go further. Multi-language meetup will succeed. So it's very good because we translate all speakers' speeches into English, in order that the speakers could use these videos in their work. For example, when communicating with some foreign projects. Thanks for the slide in English. All slides will be in open source as well as a presentation for all other speakers. Can you hear me well, louder or quieter? Fine. Excellent. Microphone is an additional load. We will try to disassemble as much detail as possible what cryptography is used in Bitcoin and how to apply it correctly. The result will be how do wallets work and some recommendations on the use of cryptographic protocols for organizing these cryptocurrency wallets. Let's start. Here is a brief information about which I have already told you. Now if you want you can take a picture. Next, the main set of topics about which we will talk. I would like to recall separately before we dive into cryptography and protocols, nevertheless about general architecture of network interaction, then about the main cryptographic libraries that use the Bitcoin protocol. Let's look at the general architecture of how the cryptocurrency wallet is organized. Then consider the model that is responsible for generating work with private or public keys. And we will try to classify wallets in order to understand the history of what they are or have been. Then about their addresses a bit and more detail how this mnemonic phrase works, which you use every day or almost every day. And also how one of the types of wallets works at the end. Tell me please, are there any people who have never tried cryptocurrency in practice and under no circumstances touched? That is, they did not forward or interact with it. There are such, but very few. It's good. Are there many developers here? Please raise your hand. There is, good. Then I'll start if there are no questions yet. I think that there will be a lot of time for questions. We have planned for 2 hours and a half. I think we'll do it in an hour. I think you can also ask questions in parallel. Yes, if there are any questions you can ask. So about the general architecture. This is a global topic, literally 2 slides. They have here such a thing as internet technology or whole sets of internet technologies, which are often embedded in the so-called TCP/IP stack. This is what most different solutions are currently working on, an enterprise or everything you use literally in a smartphone. It works one way or another on top of this stack technology. This is such a ground layer of technologies for working in the whole digital world. Here then about architecture. They have this kind of architecture which we will understand. It's centralized when the central authoritarian element or model or node that works very independently, individually. This is very rare now you can meet. It is very rare. It's more some kind of individual technology, some small website that works there with some customers who do not have any fault tolerant mechanism or something like that. It's rare that such a thing is used, but it is important to understand it. There is such thing as decentralized architecture. This is what everyone is talking about, and they think of cryptocurrency or blockchain. Decentralization is not at all connected with cryptocurrencies and blockchain, but somewhere near this time. This is a different kind of enterprise technology. That is, there are some great web services or resources, including Google or Facebook, similar to them but smaller, can be an electric outlet, sufficiently large systems which are decentralized in their architecture. They have something like this system of interaction. And already our era, which we say will destroy everything in the near future and will take the upper hand over all possible solutions they are used today, it's like a distributed architecture, when nodes work independently of any other nodes. Establish connections with those nodes with which they want to install or simply disconnect from their system, and this does not affect the overall interaction or the operation of the system. The first such system was made under the name Bitcoin, which you already know well. But today there are already quite a lot, and I expected even more. That is, their growth in a very progressive form. Literally, the main ones got on the picture, you probably know them. Questions for this part. This is an understandable part. I wanted to remind you how architecture looks. In order to understand, decentralization is not about cryptocurrencies. Without decentralization, digital space, the internet or solutions that somehow have some great user flow or service for the industry cannot work. Now consider the main things. Cryptographic algorithm or protocols that are used exactly in the Bitcoin node or Bitcoin protocol. In fact, there are 4 of them basic algorithms. The very first and most important, one of the most important, is the algorithm for digital signatures based on elliptical curves. It is according to the specification, which is indicated here CCP 256K1. This is exactly according to this specification, which is allowed to ECDSA, but this is the specification that was used for Bitcoin, Ether, and for most cryptocurrency, maybe even for everyone, far from deeping, but the main use is this particular specification of digital signatures to work in their systems. The second very important thing that is used in many places is a cryptographic hash function, namely SHA-2 256. It is important that it's a cryptographically stable hash function. Today there are theoretically broad attacks. When Bitcoin created them yet, today they theoretically exist, but it's very difficult to realize and it's quite difficult to implement it exactly in the Bitcoin system for the Bitcoin attack. It's essentially a function that makes a very simple thing, one line side for understanding. It takes itself to the input a binary message of any length and outputs a fixed message with a length of 256 bits, which is called a hash. As a matter of fact, this library, this cryptographic hash function, can identify or authenticate some digital objects because its volume of incoming message. is not limited in any way. I think it's understandable for developers. For slightly less developers, it's less clear. There is one more cryptographic function, a hash function, which is used in Bitcoin. It's RIPMD. This is also a cryptographic hash function. The algorithm of its work is the same, only it's less stable. It has a shorter message on the output. It's calculated in 160 bits. According to the principle of work, we give a message for the move, we get a strictly fixed message at the output of 160 bits. And the last thing is base 58. A simple thing is enough. This algorithm allows you to convert any binary message into an alphabetic message. It cannot be called words or readable text, but it will be a set of letters and symbols that replace an essentially binary message that consists of only zeros and ones. Naturally, this greatly reduces its visible part, and in some form it's easier to write this message to a person. By the way, Satoshi invented base 58. This is whole family of different conversations of this kind. He took base 64 and removed from there 4 characters that can be somehow confused. This 0, this small, and this a large L. He cleaned something up in my opinion. Are there any questions on this part? There are many things that are exactly embedded in the Bitcoin protocol itself, the node itself that supports or validates the Bitcoin block. It's important to separate there is cryptography which is used exclusively in Bitcoin and then it's not applied or applied in part, but there are cryptography that are not used for Bitcoins in any way, but in wallets is widely used. It's not directly related to the node of the Bitcoin protocol, but is very important for the work of the wallets themselves. Let's consider in detail how the cryptocurrency wallet is arranged. What are the main models that it has a high level without going into details. I'll allocate 5 pieces briefly. It's possible to add a smaller one, but the main ones are these 5. Naturally, this is a user interface in which you can work, somehow interact with the functionality, do some actions that allow you to receive or send cryptocurrencies. The second very important element that works directly with the case, which we'll discuss in more detail a little bit later, but this is such a very important thing, which is one of the most complex and which is used in the cryptocurrency wallet. Third, it's important to store sensitive data, exactly private keys or entropy points in some encrypted containers. You need to think carefully about how to organize it in a specific device where your wallet is running, because it's very sensitive information. As a rule, all wallets have external services. They do not work independently of external services, because as you already know, blockchains are big and heavy. It is still difficult to verify them, and if you also index the data, they become 2 times or 3 times larger, heavier and harder for the wallet itself, because each producer does or uses some developments on such backend services for cryptocurrency wallets and already support them in order for wallets to work. You directly using Bitcoin wallet do not work with the network Bitcoin in your mobile phone. You still use backend services that are supported by the wallet producer or community. It can be in many ways. It's clear that the wallet should be able to collect transactions in the format in which is acceptable, to compile it into bytecode, sign it and send it back to the network using the communication tools with the backend services. Therefore, I hope that this is understandable. What is the main function in the module connected with the management of case? They are allocated 5 pieces. First, we need to take the entropy from somewhere in order to take advantage. Stepping to the second action in order to generate case or data for the regeneration. We need to get entropy somewhere. This is a rather difficult task. Developers know this well as a random. This is not easy to solve, so I'll show you how to approach this issue, but it's important to pay attention to this. The second important function that needs it's natural how to restore a wallet with some kind of backup that you did after it was generated, or generation through the newly generated entropy. This is the third generation function through the newly generated entropy. Another important thing is that this ECDSA library is used to receive public key from the private key. Because when you tell that you have a cryptocurrency wallet, you publish the public key from your cryptocurrency wallet. That's it. This is exactly the function that is needed in this model. The last thing is to convert the public key directly to the address. A little further I will show what the address looks like and what is the address. Do you have any questions? Good. It's more complicated here. I'll tell you why. With Bitcoin here is more difficult because Bitcoin, as you probably know, is a community-driven project. That is, initially Bitcoin was developed by some people, then others were modified. Now, some other people start working on it. A project that community develops. There are a lot of different ideas in it which contradict each other, and the changes were not always made correctly. Therefore, to understand how the system is arranged from the point of view of wallets, cryptography, the function they are needed, is quite difficult. It's like a zoo. We need to go through history and read why it happened and when. It's quite an uneasy task. I'll now try to classify wallets in 3 types in order to better understand how this can be. With other cryptocurrencies, it is easier. There is no such fund there, either, or it will not. But it's not so easy with Bitcoin, especially after the last changes related with SegWit, segregated witness. At the dawn of the appearance of Bitcoin, the nodes worked with only one private key, not using any connections between them. That is, these are the things you can now do very easily in your mobile phones, for example, where down 12 or 24 words and restore all the wallets including not only Bitcoin. Such a down was not, because there was no understanding how to do it. Maybe there was not something else. Also, in the beginning it worked so that you have a library of digital signatures as you give a public key. You decode it in base 58, give it as some counterparty, he pays you there, you write off the money from there. You have one private key from one address, from another address another private key, from the third address another one, and they are not connected with each other. And in order for you to recover money on one of the specific private addresses, you definitely need to have a certain private key, the length of which is 256 bits. It was very inconvenient, therefore it was all done through a specific file called wallet date. It was encrypted additionally from above with files with encryption. This is still happening. It was quite inconvenient, and naturally the people began to think how it could be simplified or made it more convenient. After that, there was such a thing as a sequential deterministic wallet, a wallet which is chain-shaped, where each new key is clearly defined. So you can, using this protocol algorithm, get any of the keys in the chain. Let me tell you otherwise. It generates keys with a certain string which is connected cryptographically, and you do not need to backup each of them to backup an entry point or entropy or a seed phrase, which we will now explain in more detail. It will allow you to generate or restore these keys in the future in the amount that you need. That is, the quantity is not limited. It certainly simplified and improved that. How we can work with Bitcoin, because you no longer need to store a private key for each address. It's enough to save some master key, and then you can store all the wallet that you ever used in your node. This is a good thing. But they came up with an even cooler thing. This is a hierarchical deterministic wallet. That's the way it's called. This is a kind of extended version of the chain-shaped deterministic wallet. But still, there is a possibility of hierarchy. That is, using one seed phrase to build several hierarchies of wallets while using one entropy. Now I'll show you a picture of how it looks like. Here we have a master seed, the entropy from 128 to 256 bits, with which we get master node or master key, and only then, using different chain parameters, we can generate an almost unlimited numbers of wallets and build them on branches, for example. It's convenient when you're running a diverse business or several different companies. Then you can just use some other branch for different companies. Still, this piece allows you to export a certain master public key, by which you can look at the balance on your wallets. But it has no possibility for them to be written off. This is also a very convenient thing, which was not possible before to do. For example, you can give a master public key for some accounting or audit, by which they will look through the entire possible history of your wallets. But you will feel safe and know that they cannot write off this money if they still have it on your wallet. Probably I will not talk about this in detail. Still, there is still a lot of material. Maybe we'll leave this somehow next time. May I ask you? Yes. How is this chain constructed? And if this chain then breaks off, what happens in this case? How does it then unite and then begin to grow? The fact is that it cannot stop. You cannot generate the next key without providing the parameters of the previous one. The chain is a cryptographically connected chain, and it's your best interest not to break it. And it does not break. It cannot break in this way. This is not blockchain. It's not connected with some branches in communication. Somehow the chain can be divided into two or be cut off. Here everything works a little differently. There is a certain algorithm that allows you to generate the next key, and if you do not use the parameters of the previous one, you already generate a new chain, but you are already not interested. In fact, you will lose money if you do this, and do not write down somewhere to yourself as you did. This is an unlikely scenario and is quite difficult to do. What does external and internal mean? This is exactly the public and private key. Now about the types of addresses. I just showed you the sign, but we will not talk much about it. The idea that you can get many different addresses from one public key. Why this is happening? Because different addresses have their own specifics. The specifics of either the version or how it's applied. It's important to understand that the most important is still a public key, not an address. If you have a public key, you can restore or return everything that was written on it. Use this address under any circumstances. How to explain this correctly? The main idea is having one address. You always have one more public key behind you. When you have a public key, you can generate several addresses. Let's return to this chart back. Is it clear? Are there any questions? Ask questions and then become more clear. I wanted to clarify, but the difference between pubkey hash and testnet pubkey hash. The difference in the version of the generated address. In fact, the same public key is used. Next time I will need to add a slide, how the public address is arranged. It actually consists not only of a public key. It has a version, a prefix, it has a very large amount of data. Why do I say that it's important to have a public key? Because having a public and private key, you can get any of these addresses. It all depends on where you will use the digital signature that you received through ACDSA. If in a testnet, then you need to generate this. Here is the address. If you use it in mainnet, you will need to generate the following address. The difference between testnet and mainnet I understand, but what is batch 32? Batch 32 is still little used. If you have a wallet on which you have bitcoins and you suddenly updated your bitcoin wallet in the phone and restore it with a backup phrase, you will have bitcoins on this address, although you received it in the past on the old address, like that. Addresses can vary depending on how the client works. Once again, the main four types of addresses. These last two are related to segregated witness. The first two are widely used today. This is the pay to public key hash. By the way, the address is also hashed from the public key. It's not only a public key. I told you that it includes a public key in his body. Just this RIPMD 160 or pay to script hash. This type is associated with a multi-signature wallet if you use it. That's this. In Bitcoin, you can do multi-signature wallet using its scripting language, super small scripting language, and super limited. At least allows you to make multi-signature wallets, which is very useful and very necessary for the industry, I believe. Segregated witness using the particular thing could make a soft fork in Bitcoin because they took digital signatures from the main block. If this were done using only this approach, then they would not have succeeded with the help of soft fork. But due to the existence of just such a structure, they managed to do a soft fork, but this is a separate topic. Now we will return to the deterministic wallet. Consider it in more detail from the inside and how it works. Here we use the same thing that we had in the very beginning. We still need to have all this algorithm in the wallet in order to work with Bitcoin and something extra, which is used in the organization deterministic wallets. And the thing I was talking about, entropy. For entropy, the industry standard is mainly used based on practice. This is OpenSSL. There is an approach how to generate an entropy of the necessary lengths. And since it is a very widely used library, as a whole in the industry it has a sufficiently large credit of trust and is often used to obtain entropy for the operation of this function. This function is served as password-based key derivation function 2. There is also the first one. This thing, by the way, also came not from Bitcoin, but from traditional web technologies. It was using its people that learned to build these deterministic wallets. Now let's see how this is done. To make the picture bigger, I added this picture. We take 24 words and get 512-bit seed. Now I'll show you how it's done. From it we have a private key. As a matter of fact, it is 256 first bits of 512 seed and 256 following bits of these 512 seed is used as entry point for generation of the following wallet, and so the chain turns out. Now I will show you in more detail how this works. Now a more understandable thing is a mnemonic phrase or a seed phrase. Who backed up or restored the cryptocurrency using a mnemonic phrase, please raise your hand. Enough. Here are those 12 or 15 or 24 magic words that randomly out of nowhere in the new phone. Be sure that you have bitcoins and you can still spend them. How it works. If you often use them, notice that they are very often repeated. So it seems that words are enough. There are actually a few of them, a total of 248 pieces, and it can look very weak for those who have not deepened into it. Also, it is possible to brute force and to open to someone a wallet. But in fact, it's not so, and I will now try to show you why. Since I said to get the entropy, we will take the OpenSSL library. You can basically run a random function in your environment, which you use every day at work. But this is a very undesirable scenario, because the approach with a random generation is a very thorough and scrupulous thing. Because it's often possible to get the following by a random, and this is a very complex mathematical approach in order to qualitatively generate it. Let's consider step by step what is happening here. In principle, 128 bits is enough, but you can immediately take 256 bits. This we call entropy, or abbreviated ENT. probably you see such a thing that if the seed phrase is mistaken or simply swamp words in a phrase, then the wallet immediately knows that the phrase does not fit. How can it know if this is random? This happens through checksum, which is built into this algorithm. So we take this entropy, 256 bits, calculate the hash from it, and depending on the length of which, we took first and concatenate this entropy. I don't know, is it clear? I can see by face that nothing is clear. Now I'll try to explain. Who knows how the hash function works, more or less? Great, it will be easy. Concatenating is when you take one message and merge with another message. Roughly speaking, when you write words without a space. This is concatenated. In the development environment, programmers merge the bits into one message. In order to understand how many bits to take, we use this where x equal ent divided 32. If we took the entropy 256 bits, then you need to divide it into 32. I think it will turn out 11. And this is the number of bits to be taken from this computed hash, SHA-256. That should be already clear. We take 256 bits and consider SHA-256. The first 11 bits out of it are cut out and add to these 256 bits at the end. And we get a 267-bit word. And this 267-bit word, by the way, I said the wrong thing, 8 bits, right? Here we use a multiple of 11. Let me repeat it once again, lest you get confused. We take 256 bits, consider SHA-256 out of it, then cut out the first 8 bits and add to 256, and we get 264 bits, right? Here are the 264 bits concatenated, entropy plus checksum divided into groups of 11 bits. Should be multiple and should be 24. Further, everything is very simple. 11 bits are 2 to the 11th power of different values. 2 to the 11th power of different values, this will be 248 different options in our human form. 248 different options. 248 different words, just take a dictionary and choose 248 different words. Here you get the encoded entropy with a seed phrase of 24 words. Do you choose these words or do you choose someone else? How does the selection take place? You can come up with your own words, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is that there is a certain BIP which is recorded on the Bitcoin GitHub. There, in my opinion, 5 different languages that are recommended to be used as a dictionary for generating these phrases. In fact, the industry is adapted to them. There are Chinese, there is definitely English, Portuguese or Spanish. In general, there are 5 or 6 different dictionaries and all consist of 248 words. You can add your own, it does not really matter. The bottom line is that the client to whom you will provide your backup phrase would understand in which 11 bits each word to get then 264 bits of entropy. Are there any questions? What is the probability that a wallet will be hacked by this phrase? Today I read that a man accidentally made a mistake and went to someone else's wallet. What is the probability? Very, very small. This is 1 in a million. a lot more. About 2 to 80 degrees. This is a much larger number. But by and large, 2 to 256 degrees if it's good to generate entropy. This person that went to someone else's wallet, he really knows? It's just that it can be a fake story. I showed today that if you make a mistake in this seed phrase, that is, just change the words, it will not be processed strictly. Since it checks some using the algorithm that I showed you today. Rather he took someone else's seed phrase, this is more likely. He got a picture on his phone and then he said that he accidentally guessed it. If we further consider the password-based key derivation function too, in more detail, it's roughly arranged as follows. This entropy we figured out and how it turns into 24 magic words. Does it clear? I hope that it does. So, using this entropy we get the first key. Using the first key we can get the second, third, tenth, whatever you want by the number key. That is, you can generate an infinite number of keys that are linked in a chain, but the most important is that you get access to them according to one seed phrase. There is confusion with different terms. Entropy, seed phrase, mnemonic phrase are essentially the same thing. I now wanted to show such things. Salt. Often in wallets there is a passphrase, seed extension, mnemonic extension. This is an opportunity to add to your entropy, which you generate an additional passphrase. This additional security, which will allow you to have a so-called second factor to use or to back up your wallet. It's important to have a seed phrase, which you somewhere recorded, saved, put in a safe, given to the grandmother. But there is a risk factor that if someone finds it, then it will have access to all your cryptocurrencies. But if you add to it some salt, as written here or passphrase, then your original entropy will be changed. But salt can be something simple. For example, my wallet. 3 characters can be. In principle, having a seed phrase you can brute force, but it's more complicated, and you need to get into the right hands, and so on and so forth. But in this way, you can make a super small password of 6 or 8 characters. Brute force is already quite difficult. Remember it? Not write it down, it can even be human readable. For the main wallets, I think it's worth doing. Well, number of iterations. In fact, it was necessary to write that these are the number of iterations that are performed in PBKDF2. These 248, at the output it gives 512 bits, and to get the key we need 256 bits. Therefore, as I said at the beginning, you just divide 512 bits in half. The first part is your private key, and the second part is just the entropy for the next private key. So they are linked to each other. That is, even time you receive a new public key, you have some entropy to generate the next private key. There is a difficulty in that in order to get some k number 1000, you need to generate 1000 k's. Otherwise, you cannot jump over if you are recovering from a seed phrase. This may be an inconvenience from some side, but for a computer it's not difficult. There are cases when the guys use brain wallets. They just searched for the bitcoins and found transactions on the wallet's number of thousands with something. And on the first thousand, there was never a transaction. That says, someone generated a wallet for himself and started to use the k-only number 1000. As a matter of fact, it's a cryptographic firmness for the k itself and it does not add cryptocurrency, but nevertheless someone did it. Is it a more hilarious slide? Is it clear? I don't know. This in a short what I wanted to tell you. That's all I want to say. I want to go back to the types of wallets. Here is this part. Here is how PBDKF2 works. It's this wallet that works on it. This part is a little more complicated. We will consider it next time in a separate presentation. If there are questions, you can ask them. Let's applause for Vadym's presentation. Are there any questions? You were on the consensus, and it will be interesting to listen to your impressions, thoughts, where the industry is moving. And the second question, what does BlockSoft do? What projects? I know that you made the client cabinet for the ICO. Maybe there is something else? Thank you. This is not the greatest achievement that we have reached. We help ICO project to release tokens, or will develop a protocol for working with tokens, or we simply provide a client cabinet which directly allows you to help an ICO. In principle, we have 5 projects. Not everything I'm ready to call. Best of them are Remy, Trigmine, it's in final stage, Mirror Lab, also a good project. I hope a good project. Unfortunately, I do not have time to delve into the details. We have guys from Austria. The idea of their projects is to save the planet and not burn electricity for mining bitcoins. They asked us to do fork for Bitcoin with 1J governance that they will determine by community voting which miners are using renewable energy and which ones do not use. But this is a separate story. We did the protocol part for them. How did they develop the community? They developed the community itself. We did a rambling of all sorts of prototypes. By the way, the protocol the guys from San Francisco did. We participate in many different activities. Somewhere we just discuss or advise, somewhere we already did something, somewhere we are only going to do it. Our main specialization is Bitcoin and Ether, smart contracts and their security, audit including. For example, some of the projects that work with us are the result of successful audit, more precisely unsuccessful for them, because in fact critical vulnerabilities were found in the contracts about which we wrote them. Well, another question was about consensus. I was a year ago on the consensus and I can compare. My impression is that the industry has grown very, very much. People were very positive. I did not observe any skepticism. Although now in many environments there is skepticism due to the failing currencies. According to my observations, very many projects are preparing to go out. Some in public, some in a private fund. There is some consolidation of efforts and understanding of where technology can bring an additional value. Therefore, in my understanding, the industry is moving toward development and in different directions. I'm not ready to say that in the particular direction something will develop more faster than in some other. Except of course the financial sector, but this is understandable. I think everyone appreciated the transformation of the venture environment. I'm not an expert in this field, but I had to understand. Are there any other questions? Once I got the microphone, I'll ask Vadym about the consensus. Consensus conference. You said that there are a lot of good projects, lots of cool things, but how do you feel about the fact that Vitalik Buterin together with Ethereum team did not got this consensus? And actually, Cardano headed by Hoskins also refused to got this consensus. And in general, many projects boycott the consensus and the building of CoinDesk, which holds this conference. Do you think they're doing the right thing or not? I think that this is more of politics fields, only in a cryptocurrency environment. It seems to me that one cannot consider their actions from the point of view of correctness. This is a wrong approach. It's more important that they get attention in the information space or do not receive it. If they had a goal to get attention, then they all do it right, and they are very successful in this. This is not the first time I've heard that they boycotted something. Probably they did the right things from the point of view of the press event. Boycotting the conference because of the high cost, as Buterin wrote, is not logical, since most conferences do not differ in value. And according to the degree of the scam, from the content point of view, it's very difficult for me to evaluate it, because I could not participate in all discussions. Since I have always met or communicated with someone, I cannot evaluate the content, but the visits, I don't know. Scams are everywhere. Andrei doesn't listen. The ticket price should deny the scammer for some reason. I'm sorry that I occupied the microphone. Are you sure that the price should deny the scam? It seems to me that there is no correlation between the price of the ticket and scam. For example, we came to you today for free. Nevertheless, you told the right things about the hierarchical generation of keys. Therefore, it seems to me that there is no correlation. And let's ask a question about the hierarchical generation of keys. If the assumption that the user will destroy the keys after each signing of the transaction, and then we hope he will do so.
Вопрос состоит в том, что является ли это секьюрным предположение о том, что пользователь будет после каждого подписывания транзакции уничтожать ключи. И что мы надеемся, что он на самом деле так будет поступать. Является ли это... Просто мне кажется, что это в некотором...
It seems to me that this contradicts the preconditions of security. Whether this the approach to security when after each signature the previous key is deleted from the hierarchical case in order to not be at the same level, to sign the same block. Are you asking about wallets now? No, I'm asking already about the use of hierarchical case for signing not a transaction but blocks in proof-of-stake consensus algorithms. How can you remove it? I do not quite understand. They have economic incentives because they will be fined if they sign the block at the same level. So it's advantageous for them to remove this case. I think that from the point of view of security, this should not be a problem. Even if they delete them and this ecosystem is open and this is a community driven system, then this should not become a problem in my understanding. It's like a 51% attack in Bitcoin. That's it. We can talk about it, but we couldn't tell in detail how to implement it. Perhaps this was true when people were mining on processors, but today the 51% attack is not relevant. But only 4 mining pools controls 51%. But you're not a mining pool, and you control the mining pools. If something happens from the point of view of the 51% attack, you will tell about it in your community. And this will break the particular system. It's possible to discuss here. But from the point of view of security, this should not be a problem that will prevent the system from functioning. Still questions will be? And what specifically is the use of the hierarchy when creating hierarchical case? With the consistent is understandable, and with the hierarchy you can create several from one, right? And from each of these several, you can create a few more and so on. If there are any practical using of them. As I said, for example, for different business processes, you can use different chains. You can conduct a different business and you need to keep this accounting separately and a different kind of relationship with client. This due to the use. It's hardly useful to the end user, but it will be necessary for some business structure. Probably clear, thank you. Thanks for the report. How about a little detail about SegBit? How does the signature for a block reduce its size? As conventionally achieved 2 or 3 megabytes block size in Bitcoin. If you discard a piece of data from a block, then its capacity increases, because if the average transaction consisted of X bits, then now such transaction X bits minus signature. Accordingly, such transactions can be placed in the block more. Do I clearly explain? There are complex transactions with a large number of inputs and outputs. This very much saves in such transactions a place, because to each input and output a separate signature had to be kept for each output. Now, with the advent of SegBit, You use one signature for the entire transaction. Okay, I think this was the final question. Let's once again applause to Vadym. Thank you very much. Very detailed report. Thank you for trying to make it understandable for everyone, not just developers. This is very cool and very rare. You can watch this meetup record on Cyber Academy YouTube channel. Baby.